Hello, my name is Brent Hunt. That is Brant Hunt, Hunt. It's approximately 7 o'clock here on the Eastern Coast here. Thought about just going ahead and do one more chapter tonight from this particular book I'm reading, which is simply called Psychology and Kabbalah. The title of the chapter is simply chapter 28 called A Working System. So appreciate you being here. So let's get into the reading here. By the time the id or ego or and superego dash idea complex are operational in the psyche, the individual is well, if not completely, incarnate. This means that the person has a relationship with the inner and outer worlds and can operate in both. However, it should be remembered that the psyche still only sees external reality in terms of central images, and most of what is seen is a very subjective view, according to personal temperament and cultural. So, what he's trying to say simply is that is based upon whatever culture you're brought up in or whatever your viewpoint, when you see someone doing something you feel like is wrong, that's part of your own. Well, we say simply what you as a whole see is wrong, while maybe you would not. You see, depending on the family background and where the person are, so to speak. Thus, the Bedouin is the in its desert, that is, will see things no town dweller would notice, and vice versa. All that we perceive is greatly modified, moreover, by the interactions of the three systems we are about to examine. According to many psychologists, the energy of the psyche is derived from the body. This one world view is held because they do not recognize the existence of other dimensions and cannot grasp the reality of different worlds, each of which is a complete structured dynamic cosmos. The truth is that physicality is confined to its own world. It can only reach in terms of its interpenetrating trees of psyche and body, the coarsest level of the mind. No doubt, exchanges and conversions of energy between the two organisms occur as thought and emotions are transformed into action. But these processes are communication through the thought dash yasod connection of ego rather than the massive inflows of energies. The brain is a highly complex mechanism compared with the stomach, but it is quite crude in operation next to the subtlety of the psyche. Taking the lower level first, the energy generated by the body is used by instincts to keep it alive. According to Freudian, this energy has a different, or I should not say have a different, but a distinct characteristics in that it flows through a aim towards a specific object. Thus, hunger in the body sets up the desire to eat, and therefore to seek food. This process is basic, inasmuch as the id nefesh will always try to relieve any physical tension. When relief has been attained, aim vanishes and equilibrium is reestablished until the next need arises. This continence or this continuous process that drives the organism is annotated as quote source end quote or dash quote aim or object and or what we call anpedagogus and subdivided into internal aim end quote that is equilibrium and quote external aim end quote that is attaining the objective such as food or sex. In itself, this process is quite repetitive and compulsive and corresponds to the vegetable triad Makub, Had, Nazad, and Yasad of in the body tree. Because the id nefesh has no discrimination, it can and often will produce in the imagery of Yasad a picture of what it desires. This is based upon the body's experience and the symbolic form the ego places upon such things as apples, which evoke all the qualities of the fruit and how it can satisfy. Such images, of course, cannot fulfill the need of the id, the fesh, and so action is planned to possess and eat it. This process can equally apply to acquiring a car or a sexual partner. The image of which is charged with what is called, quote, object catathesis, end quote. This means that the object desired by the id becomes loaded with psychological interest or energy, which originates in the Dasada vehicle of the psyche, not in the body. It also illustrates how many things are imbued with a diamond that we give them because of memory, desire, projection, and many other associations that attach themselves to whatever we see or what the id nefesh targets. The reality is that psychological power is projected into any object that resembles what it is in our mind at the moment. Now, Freud argued that sex, for example, was projected into all sorts of objects, and this was because of the id nefesh will seek release anywhere it can if it cannot be relieved by the normal means. This gives rise to the notion of the displacement or energy taken away from its prime object and projected into another as a secondary release. The childless woman dawning upon her cat illustrates this. Indeed, much of life is influenced by the association of common characteristics which may not, in essence, be related. Once upon a time, a suntan in winter was associated with the rich, as is a Royal Rolls Royce thought of as a synopsis with success, although in fact neither may be true. It's just a collective association. These are myriads of such things that are charged with psychological categories that stimulate interest, that is. Advertising depends on it. Indeed, the words new and free, when applied to most objects, will set the id nefesh working on finding a release and a sale for the producer who has stimulated the desire in the marketplace. The ego task is this triparticle system is to differentiate reality from fantasy. Experience shows that not every image of food, for example, can be eaten. It may just be the id using the ego yasada imagination to say that it is hungry if a picture of a hot dog comes to mind. The ego has the capacity to identify the difference between it refers to memory based upon experience that it filed in the psyche. The next figure he has here, figure 32 in this book, is called machine. The most important realization in development in the recognition that the body and the ordinary mind is a mechanism. While we accept that the physical organism is almost entirely automatic, it is difficult to explain to many that the lower psyche operates mostly from habit. Yeah, it's the habit when we get up at a certain time, put on certain clothes, which sock we put on, which foot first, whatever is part of a habit. It is very versatile. Everything it thinks, feels, and does is largely due to conditioning. Moreover, the ego's power is, in the mass of people, the dominant factor in life. However, from time to time, amid routine, a situation may occur where they have to shift from a mechanized or mechanical reaction to a conscious response. These are crucial or critical opportunities for development. This is from Tobias Cohen in the 18th century. This is a piece of work of the machine, and I'll see if I can show. I don't have a way of showing that. No, he does show a body, and then he shows this. Sorry, guys, can't do that. Can't share it that way. If that was another book, I'd show it to you. As the doorkeeper between the inner and outer realities, it will advise the person to hold on to the instinctive impulse until the moment is right to eat. Where an adult cannot always just yell for food and get it if he wants it. This restraint is possible because of the many anti-catheter associations, as they are called, within this superego idea that opposes the id nefesh even though it may have a delicious meal in front of it. Here we see how positively or negatively charged elements work to counterbalance each other. The function of the Yasada ego is to see that the person relate their instinctive needs to what is sociable acceptable. This gives the ego the crucial role of pivot between the side pillars and the upper and lower faces of the physical and psychological trees. The super dash ego dash idea exists in a purely psychological world. As such, it has little common sense because it has no direct contact with physical reality. However, like the id nefesh impulse, the super dash ego dash idea has its compulsions. From its unconscious pillars of severity and mercy, it will relentlessly give out punishment and rewards based upon the thousands of catharets and anti-catechex charges that hold the emotional intellectual association in their active and passive side triads. These opposing and complementary galaxies of complexes are a fusion of the person's individual and collective experiences, which add up to a considerable influence. Most people are unaware of this until their psyche is perhaps momentarily unbalanced. An example of this is when a man picks up a lost wallet. The temptation to pocket it and thereby gain something that somebody would have gone anyway, i.e., is countered by the feeling of guilt and the thought of what would happen if it were found out from his superego. The ego, as peg in the middle, might see images of the money being spent in a great splurge on the one hand and the trial scene in court of the other. Being the realist of the triparticle system, the ego would then conclude that it would be best to take the wallet to the police station. Now, while the id has been held in check by the super dash ego, the ego dash idea then prompts the man to celebrate as a reward. This, however, may be countered by the ego, which knows the man cannot afford it, and he is merely deluding himself that he is honest because for a moment his id nefesh nearly got away with it. Seen in modern mythology, the ego has acted like a pragmatic U.S. Marshal caught between a puritanical saint, in the parentheses it says super dash ego dash idea, and a bandito, id, in spaghetti western movie. There are occasions when the three-part system does not always work so smoothly. Usually the super dash ego dash idea will oppose any primitive moves made by the id, but sometimes there is confusion and even distortion. This can occur in personal crisis or in a social context. Take, for example, a country under invasion. The enemy are everywhere, destroying not just the fabric of the towns, but a whole way of life. The collective mind of the invaded people may then generate an image of the enemy as totally evil. This happens in most wars, and soon quite stable and respectable individuals are making the most devastating attacks upon their foes as the mortido aspect of the id nefesh, backed by the superego, uses the ego's practicality to take vengeance on the intruders for trying to destroy their quote ego dash idea. Such things as freedom and as religious or national identities are used to fan the wrath of the super dash ego and spur the id as the ego image on people fighting for whatever they believe and obscures what they are actually doing. The same occurs in the personal level when a man has his sense of reality disturbed by drugs or stress. If the ego is disabled by physical or psychological trauma, it may allow the id and the super dash ego idea, both which are irrational, to run riot. This can precipitate a violent outburst or a total mental collapse until the ego reestablishes stability and then supremacy over the uncontrolled interflow between the upper face of the body, that is the body tree, and the lower face of the psyche. The normally conventional man who frequently brothels after losing his wife until he realizes what he was doing is an example of this. In less dramatic circumstances, the combination can be manipulated by any one of the factors, for example, the Yasada ego. on seeing a particular delicious cream cake can liberate the superego of vice and enjoy it with the id. Likewise, the passion of the id nefesh can be used to overcome the common sense of the ego when courting a girl who the ego-idea, usually mistaken, believes is perfect because she conforms to his criteria, to his criteria. Many works of art have been created by the combining of nefesh energy, Yesod's imagination, the super-ego-idea, pursuit of excellence. These masterpieces, however, always have a feeling of unreality about them. The works of creation have on another quality, and that is the dimension of the self, which, as Tiferet, or the conscious arbitrator of truth and beauty, introduces something of a higher order by its connection with the world of creation. That is why original art is so rare. The Yesod ego is designed to manage everything, every day's reality. As such, it is supreme, but it cannot see as deeply as Tiferet or create like the self. It can only imitate, although superbly. The power, the structure, the complexity, and subtlety of the ego, however, should not be underestimated. It is the crucial clearinghouse between psyche and body. Its development and education, especially during the early years, will determine its capacity in processing all the paths and triads convergent upon it, through which flow the impressions and drives of the id and the dreams, projections, and aspirations, not aspirations, and inspirations of the unconscious. A weak or narrowly focused ego is like a poor value that controls very powerful forces, which ebb and flow at many levels and in great variety. Consider walking down a familiar street. Many things are taken care of by this automatic pilot as it reads a shopping list, ponders a professional problem, tries to deal with an unconscious worry or nagging leg pain as you dodge through the traffic while talking politely with a friend who wants your attention. All this and more is going on at the same time, and the reason the ego can cope is because there are several psychological devices which prevent it from being overwhelmed by the outside world. The id, nefesh, and the unconscious. These are called by the techno term defense mechanism, end quote, and they are vital in preserving the balance of the psyche. And that is concludes to chapter 28 tonight. So I appreciate your listening. Hope that you gleaned some wisdom from what this particular author has shared with us. Thank you for being here. And hopefully we'll get some questions tomorrow. Tomorrow will be some questions to deal with this particular book. Hopefully it'll be live. It'll be during probably about 2 o'clock London time and 9 o'clock my time. So, some of the books, some of the questions I have asked would be saying, why Kabbalah? Why pursue it? What's important about it? Type of thing. Why is it? There are so many people out there writing these books, so to speak, such and such. Why Kabbalah? Like, for example, how important do you see it for us to understand? In other words, I'm going to be talking to Phil, but just asking this question: why do you see it's important? I think we are not aware of it working in our lives. No, we're not aware of it. See, we tend to be automatic all the time. We're not connected. Did we choose to be a part of this? In other words, did we choose to be a part of this whole situation we're in? What does each part? Let's see what's the work here. Here it is. What does each part speak about? In other words, I'm sorry, what does each part mean? In other words, each particular part of the tree, what part, why are they so important, so to speak? Are they sort of like a cog that makes this machine work? And then why so few ever even pursue this? In other words, why at this junction of our lives, and why we don't pursue this? What keeps people from getting involved and looking for something deeper? it's become pretty obvious to me that the church itself and Christianity just does not answer the questions deeper. They don't. They do it superficially. It's taken me a long time to get to this particular perspective. Because the church is looking at everything in a particular way. So they don't see a wisdom in front of them. They just choose to do the mundane, so to speak. There are very few people who will actually even ask those questions, to see, because people tend to want to take the easiest route. We all tend to do that. If we had the choice to go to a certain place and it's, take the long road to it or take the short road, most people would take the short road. In fact, 99% would do that, if not more. So, anyway, thank you for being here. I appreciate your attendance. I wish you a good evening. You take care. We'll talk soon.